Hello and welcome to Board Game Gumbo. Today we're unboxing Oath from Leader Games. We also have a packet of sleeves to go along with the game, which we'll be taking a look at the very end. This is a Kickstarter version, as you can see from the corner of the box, and I'll go through at least the components that I'm aware of that are different in the retail version. Let's go ahead and go through. So Oath is a game for 1 to 6 players. There is a solo version. Each game is going to play between 45 minutes and 2 hours. So there's a bit of variation there, and that's probably going to be mostly on player count. All right, so we got a couple different rule books here. So Oath has a variation on a campaign system, and this would be very similar to games like Fabled Fruit or King's Dilemma, whereas how a scenario is won, who wins it specifically, will affect the next play of the game. So you're altering the game as you play. So there's this read first book here, and this is, I believe, just going to run you through how to set up your first game. And then as the game progresses, obviously things are going to change. But we have all of our contents here, your setup for your first game, and an explanation of all the places on the map. There are various different ways to win the game, and so there's always a shifting board state that can change how the game wins each playthrough. So that's kind of interesting. They go through just basic actions that you can take on your turn. Then they have some walkthroughs. This is a fairly complicated game from what I can tell. This is one where I generally get the gist of a game through reading a rule book or watching a single video, but this one took me a little extra time because there are a lot of different things going on. Some extra rules here. All right, and then we have another rule book. This is just our, I guess, our general rule book, where the first one was sort of for your very first game. This one's just key components, things like that. So this is more of a reference rule book than anything else. And then finally, we have a couple guides here. So as I said, when you finish playing your first game, a lot of things are going to change for your second game. And this page here specifically tells you this is their Chronicle system. So there'll be a couple different changes, and that looks very complicated. Oh, this is the AI. So this is if you're playing solo. Again, more for the AI, just a card reference, a couple of those to go around the table. So just some player aids there, but that's nice to see. Here we have our Punchboard. So there are 2 resources in the game. There's Favor here, which are these coins. And these resources are generally spent. And then you have Secrets over here. Secrets you will typically get back when you use them. You'll just put them out on the board to show that you spent them for that round, but then they'll refresh basically. You have a couple boards at the bottom here. So this Reliquary board, there are basically 2 types of characters in the game. There's the Chancellor, who starts in the position of power, and they're going to have this Reliquary board, and it's going to have some items hiding up these 4 spots on it. And then every other player is going to play as an Exile. So there's several of these, there should be more, but these are basically going to change game from game, and these will tell you how you win, or at least one of the victory conditions. So if we're playing with this one, Oathkeeper of Supremacy, then you're trying to rule the most sites. That's how the Chancellor wins. And then if he has a citizen, citizens are in purple, and the citizens can win if they hold more relics and banners than the Chancellor at the end of the game. And then if neither of those are met, or the game goes to the final round, then you have sort of a priority list of who wins. So the Emperor is Oathkeeper, Oathkeeper means that he meets this objective. Then you have Usurper title, Visionaries, and Empire. Another set of punchboard. So again, more of these sort of victory condition tiles. And whenever you set up the game, it'll tell you which one of these you're going to use. We have these banners. This is another way to win the game. So these banners will be competed for during the course of a game. The banner of the people's favor, you'll spend favor to gain. And then the banner of the darkest secret, you'll spend secrets to gain. And these give you special abilities and are also a way that you can win the game. The Oathkeeper tile here will just determine who is the current Oathkeeper, who currently meets that objective that's set for the game. If it is the Chancellor or a Citizen, they get this side. And if it's an Exile, they actually get the Usurper side. And if you get the Usurper side and it stays on the Usurper side until your next turn, that's a victory condition as well. So as you can see, several different victory conditions in this game. All of these are for the AI, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm actually just going to leave these as are and not punch them out. And then we get to the main portion of the game. So here we have character boards. So again, one player is always going to play as the Chancellor. The Chancellor is like the king, right? He's the guy in charge. So he's going to start with the strongest position on the board, but then every other player is basically not only competing against each other, but specifically competing against the Chancellor. So the Chancellor is going to get attacked more often than probably any other player on the board. But you'll see here on the left here, every player board also tells you the basic rounds of the game or the structure of your player round, and then what actions you can take. So these are the different actions you can take while playing the game. You can search, which lets you go through a deck of cards. Muster lets you get more of your worker pieces on your board, and those obviously give you strength in combat and things like that. You can trade favor for secrets or secrets for favor. Recover allows you to gain relics at your site. Those are basically items that can give you special powers or defensive or attack bonuses. Campaign is how you attack other players. There's also a neutral player that's bandits, I believe. So there's an option for that as well. That's even in the multiplayer game, not just a solo game. In the multiplayer game, if nobody controls an area, then it's considered controlled by bandits and you can still campaign against it. And then travel is just how you move. You also have minor actions like peeking at cards or things like that. And then, of course, your turn always ends with a rest action where you reset your different things. How you take these actions are based on your supply. So every player has a supply that's going to refill every round, but not necessarily to full. For the Chancellor here, it resupplies based on the number of workers that he has left in his supply pool. So not on his board and not on the game board, but what he has left in the supply pool. Depending on how many he has, that's how much supply he's going to have for the next round. And if you end a round with leftover supply, that's going to add after the fact. So if you use supply down to here, so you have one left over, and then say you have 12 people left in your supply, then you're going to refresh to here and then get that extra one back from not having spent it for that round. You also have a spot over here for your advisors. Each player can have 3 advisors, and those are cards that you can gain by searching, and they'll typically give you some type of special power or maybe something you can activate once a round like that. The Chancellor does have a backside to his board. This is for the AI, basically. And then we have the Exiles. So every Exile has a different board. Their only difference is the art and color and things of that nature. Otherwise, they play the same. And of course, their little meeples are going to be slightly different. So Exiles can win a couple of different ways. One, they can be this Usurper, which is, meet the objective of that game, whatever that objective may be, like controlling the most territories, and then holding on to that for a full round. That's one way they can win. They can also win by gaining a vision card, which we'll look at when we get to the cards. And that's why you have a spot here. Whenever you gain a vision card, you're going to put it here. And then Exiles can also be turned into citizens. Citizens can also win through those tiles that we looked at earlier. So citizens, the Chancellor wants to win this, but citizens want to win this, and it is different. So in this game, the Chancellor wants to hold the people's favor, but as a citizen wants to hold the darkest secret, and that's how they win the game. So becoming a citizen actually changes your win condition. It also links you with the Chancellor. You use his pawns now instead of your regular pawns, and your supply refreshes to the level of the Chancellor's supply. So kind of interesting in that way. We have the game board here. Let's take a look at this real quick. And this is a neoprene mat. I think this is the first game, at least that I can remember, where the game board that just comes with the game is a neoprene mat, as opposed to being like an extra. So here's our mat. We'll go through different things on it. So this is here's the turn tracker right here. You'll have a little piece here. And this is interesting because the first 5 rounds are just general play. But when you get into the last 3 rounds, you actually have a chance for the game to end early. And that's only if the Chancellor is the Oathkeeper. If he holds that tile for whatever objective you're playing with. So if he holds the Oathkeeper tile because he holds the people's favor, because that's the tile you're playing with, then when you get into this round, you're going to roll a die. And if you roll a 6, the game is going to end early, basically. So that's kind of interesting. There's a variable ending to each game. You're then going to have, you know, spot for a relic deck, spot for a world deck. This is the search action, which you saw on the player board. It will go up in cost as you basically go through more of the world deck. You have 3 locations in the game, the cradle here, and then there's the provinces, and finally the hinterland, which we'll see later. Each location will have a certain number of cards. The cradle will have 2. The other ones will have 3 each. And then up here, you see the different costs for movement. So movement within the same area is this little 360 arrow, and that costs 1 at the cradle. Movement to the right, which would be moving from the cradle to the province, would cost you 2. And then moving from the cradle to the hinterlands, which is on the other side of the board, would cost you 4. And then you can also search the discard pile of each area, and that'll cost 2. So again, our second area, which is our province, again, more of the movement costs, they are different. And then the discard pile, 3 locations. And finally the hinterlands with its own movement and discard pile. And then down here, you'll see where favor goes. So there are different factions in the game represented by these symbols. And you'll be gaining favor with those factions by taking coins from these locations. And also when you use cards, the coins that you use to activate them go to these locations as favor. So that's our game board. And by the way, this is a nice neoprene mat. This isn't a cheap one. You can see the edges are very nice. I especially like the color, but you know, I like Leader Games color choices in general. So that's not surprising to me. Okay, so we have extra bags. We have a box specifically to hold our world cards. We have a Chronicle book, and this is pretty fancy. It feels like leather. And this, I assume, will keep track of the changes. Yeah, so this will keep track of who wins and what changes every time you go to the Chronicle system. So you can set up for a new game. And plenty of pages in there. I assume that'll get you through more than a single playthrough of the game. I don't know if the game like infinitely changes or if at a certain point you reset back to basic. But that's nice. Let's see what else we got. Dice. So 3 types of dice in total. So one, we just have a D6. And again, that's for that end condition that we saw on the turn track. I think that's all it's used for. We've got defensive dice. So obviously you can attack other players in this game. That's one of the ways that you can knock them out of areas. You can also attack specifically like their items and steal their items from them by succeeding in an attack against their items. Every time you attack somebody, you're going to choose however many of their things you want to attack. If you want to attack their meeples, if you want to attack their figure, if you want to attack their items, you can choose as much as that as you want, but everything you choose is going to add defensive dice for that character. And then the blue are the defensive dice. They've got 1 values, 2 values, and they actually have a ×2 side, which obviously will multiply all their defensive rolls. For the attack dice, you have 2 successes, but you immediately have to kill off one of your meeples. Your number of attack dice whenever you're attacking something is equal to the number of meeples you have on your board. So again, 2, but you lose a meeple, 1 success. These are half successes. And then after both sides roll, the attacker has the option of losing meeples for 1 additional combat each time. That's our dice. What else do we have here? We have our secret tiles. So this is going to be different in the retail version of the game. I know that these are cardboard. We actually punched them out a little earlier, but in the Kickstarter version, you get these really nice 3D books. We have favor tokens. Again, there are cardboard versions of this in the retail game, but the Kickstarter edition has metal favor tokens. Then we have all of our meeples. So each player and the Chancellor has a certain number of meeples. The meeples basically being your workers or your soldiers, whatever you want to call them. And the Chancellor has the most. And then each player is also going to have a player pawn, which is bigger and represents your actual character. So purple for the Chancellor, and then all the exiles have their own. The fox for the orange player, and then I guess that's a rabbit. I don't know exactly what that's supposed to be, but all your different pawns for your different player colors. Each player also has a player disc, and then the round tracker is the big silver cube. And then this is just a tracker for one of the, for the search deck. We explained earlier on the character board how the cost of searching can go up and down. That's what tracks that. All right, so then we're at cards. Several different types of cards. Here we have locations. And again, these are going to change as you play. You have the specific locations for the first game, and then as you go through that Chronicle system, those locations may change for your second game and third game and so on. So a very odd size card. I'm glad they provided sleeves because I don't know where I'd find sleeves in this size. Locations can give you defensive bonuses for being there. The number is how many advisors can be in a location. We haven't gone through advisors yet. That's a next deck that we'll get to. Sometimes they have bonuses when they're revealed. So most locations are going to start the game unrevealed until somebody goes there. And then when you reveal it, you will typically get something at that location. So most of the time here you see that there's relics that get added. This one adds secrets and 2 relics, which is a lot. And just going through some of our locations. Again, I like this art style. It's very similar to Root and other later games. And here we have this is sort of our startup. So I believe this packet here, this chunk of cards here is specifically for your first game. It's basically telling you how to set up your first game with all the locations that you're going to put out. And so these are just extra locations that you'll get through as you continue playing. We got a little organizer here for our different resources, and we'll put all this back together to make sure it fits back in the box. That's something I like to do. What else do we have here? So our regular cards. So again, This is specifically going to be the cards for your first playthrough. They've gone through and they've basically made your first play as easy as possible by saying, this is what you put out in this order, so you don't really have to think too hard about it. So basically this also tells you just how to set up your first play, because it's all pretty much determined. So these are the world deck. These are cards that will be in that world deck that we talked about earlier that you can search. I'll just go through a few of them in the back here. And there's two types. So these are basically people. They can be advisors or they can go to locations. They each have a particular affinity. So there's factions here, and that matters sometimes. They also sometimes have an icon here, not always. This one does, but you'll notice this one doesn't. This icon says that this card has to go to a location. There's also icons that say that this card has to be an advisor. And then on the bottom here, you see it has an action. An action sometimes have a cost, but not always. This one does, 1 favor. And this one gives you 1 secret, but then you have to end your act phase. So this card specifically has to go to a location, but sometimes you'll get a card like this one, and you can choose. Now you can choose to keep this as an advisor, so it'll go to your play area, or if you gain it by searching, you could put it in a specific location. And this one actually has a battle action. So if you're taking the campaign action, you can activate this card if it's your advisor, or if it's at a location that you control. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of different cards. They appear to all be unique. I mean, I'm probably not going to go through enough of them, but from what I can see, they all appear to be unique, which is interesting. And then we have these vision cards. So you may remember on the player boards, they had a spot for a vision card, and that's this. And this is a victory condition for the Exiles. If you gain one of these vision cards, and then you complete this objective, you will win the game. So again, several different ways to win in Oath, and that'll be one of them. So more cards here. This just looks like more of the same, more of the world deck cards. Yep, just more of these advisor cards. And here's the symbol that says that it has to be an advisor, whereas this one has to be a location. There's also some, like this one, that has this little chain icon, means that it cannot be discarded at any point for any reason. The other thing is the vision cards. So the vision cards have a different back, and that will essentially affect the game as they're drawn. It's one of the timers of the game, basically. Another deck of cards here. So this one, you're going to hold on to until after you play your first game. And I think these are just the more complex cards. So they don't want you adding them in your first game. Some of these are actually double-sided. I haven't seen any yet, but I think that's some of them. So these are double-sided. And these are the more complicated game cards. So they don't want you adding these in your first game, but they will get added again as you start playing. More of the same here, just another deck of world cards. Again, if these are all different, if they're all unique, that's a lot of variability. And they certainly appear to be all unique to me. And then finally, small deck of cards. These are going to be our relics, which are basically items that you can acquire that will give you either like special bonuses. So the Grand Scepter usually starts with the Oath Keeper. You can see here it adds a bunch of defensive dice. So basically, like I said, when you choose to campaign or attack somebody, you choose what you're attacking. So you can attack items. But if you were to attack the Grand Scepter, it adds 5 defensive dice just for this one card. But the Grand Scepter is what lets you turn exiles into civilians. So the Chancellor will have the Grand Scepter at the start of the game, which means he has the option of turning people into citizens. And that's typically good for the Chancellor because that's one less person attacking him. So he may want to do that. It has a certain requirement to it. So you offer citizenship to an exile, or you can exile a citizen that's not yourself. But the Chancellor can basically, offer you things in order to turn you into a citizen, give you resources. Because again, that's helping himself. And sometimes players may want to become citizens because the win condition for the citizen is easier than any other win condition for them. We have some more items. It looks like this is the one that starts at the beginning of the game. But then at the back here, you just see more reliquaries. And again, we'll take a look at a couple of them. So again, defensive dice get added. After traveling, gain 1 warband. You must gain secrets instead of favor when you play to a site. And so you see that it'll give you what icon that these affect. These specifically affect your movement phase. This specifically affects your search phase. So, and then some of them don't have any of them because it affects you always. So the circle of command here, players cannot target or take your banners or your other relics. In campaigns, banishing your pawn and favor adds 1 more defensive dice. And the Chancellor will have a couple of these at the beginning of the game. That's why he had that reliquary board. And by giving people citizenship, he actually takes the items from that reliquary board and gives them to the citizen, which unlocks special abilities for him. So there's a lot of interplay here with the actions you're doing. The Chancellor is trying to turn people into citizens because it's less people that hurt him. It also allows him to gain special abilities by giving out reliquaries. Players are getting reliquaries by becoming citizens. It also changes their win condition. So there's a lot going on there. That's everything in the Kickstarter edition of Oath. I'm going to go ahead and organize it all, put it back in the box, as well as sleeve the cards and give you a look at those. All right, now we've got everything sleeved and ready to put it back together in the box. Let's talk about a few things first. First of all, you do have extra sleeves, which is always nice just in case something tears or whatever. This little organizer here, aside from being pretty full, is extremely nice. Again, these are basically all your resources, whether you're attacking, defending, secrets, and favors. So this is going to be nice to just be able to pull out and put on the board. Here is most of the Denizen cards, but not all of them will fit in that side of the board. So that's a little unfortunate. It would take a lot more space to fit all the cards. So I don't know if they would fit all there unsleeved, but I'm assuming they would. Obviously, whenever you are increasing the size of a box specifically for sleeve cards, you run into a lot of issues with packing and how many you can fit in a box or on a container or things like that. So not too worried about that. Here we have just some extra stuff. I also put all of our relics in this little box up here. Unfortunately, you can't stand them up straight like I would like to, because you need this spot right here flat for the character boards. But that's just a little extra slot for, various different things. And then in our main area here, we're going to have all of our player pieces and basically everything else we have for the game. Our world box is really nice because not only does it fit our sleeved location cards, if I can get it open, not only does it fit our sleeved location cards, but there's a lot of extra room in there as well. So I like having that. Put that right there and just sort of find a space for everything else. There's no real packing guide or anything, so it's pretty much just find whatever works. We're gonna need some room for cards over here. Let's see if we can get those. There we go. And then our organizers for our solo mode. It's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, but we'll make it work. Our Chronicle. So this is why you gotta have this flat, because your player boards need to fit into this little slot right there, which makes it a little difficult to fit everything else. Maybe we'll put those on top. All of our rule books and reference guides and everything that may not sit exactly flat, but we're going to give it a shot. Yeah, there's a little bump there, so I probably try to make that fit a little bit flatter. But that's everything we've got for Oath with everything back in the box.